Hello, my name is Amber Hudson. I am the Vice President of Educational Services at First Makerspace. We are a company based out of Indianapolis, Indiana that designs, builds, and sustains makerspaces across the country. This involves a number of components. One major piece is the furniture that we make. We have also a collection of STEM kits and equipment that we include in makerspaces. And then probably our most important piece, and the piece that I oversee, is the professional development that comes along with each purchase that we sell. And so through the process of doing that PD now for several years, I've taken the experience that I had within the classroom. I was a classroom teacher for 22 years in a STEM science classroom. That's my background. And so between the teaching opportunities that I had and now the professional development that I've been doing for the last 4 years, I've really come to find some pieces of equipment, STEM kits, and websites that I really find helpful in a STEM classroom. And Tinkercad is one of those. And so I wanted to share today how Tinkercad works, give you a quick tutorial on what this site offers. There is so much to it, and it is so valuable in a classroom, whether you're a STEM teacher or not. There are multiple ways that you can use this site. So the focus of my presentation today is tinkering with Tinkercad. So the first thing that you're going to need to do on a device is to go to a website that is tinkercad.com. So you can see that listed up at the top, Tinkercad, tinkercad.com. It'll bring you to this page, which is where you would either sign up if you are brand new to Tinkercad or log in here. So the sign up button is in the upper right hand corner. When I click on that, then I want to make sure that I choose the educator site here. So if you are someone working within a school, whether you want to create a class or not, you would start by creating an account for your classroom. If you were an after school care program or someone that, say, works in Boys and Girls Clubs or Girls Inc., something like that, you would also create an educator account so that you can have students access your classroom. So from here, after clicking on educators, you'll go through the process of signing up for an account, which is filling in all of your information. Once you have logged in and created an account, it'll take you to the home screen of Tinkercad, which looks like this. And this is kind of where we're going to spend the majority of our time today as we just kind of learn about the different aspects that Tinkercad has to offer. So if I was logged in as a teacher, this would say, instead of create a class. I already have my classes created, but it's a very easy step to add students into your classroom. The benefits of having a class created is that it then stores all of your student designs within your page, which is really helpful if you were to continue on with Tinkercad and go into 3D printing. You would want to have access to your student designs. That's the benefit here. If you were a student logging in, back on that initial first page that we looked at, there's an actual button for students to choose to log in. You would be provided with a class code. You would share that with your students, and then they would automatically have access to your class. So within Tinkercad, we're going to kind of just explore all of the options that you have for using Tinkercad in a variety of ways. So the first thing that I want to point out are these choices across the top. So I'm going to start kind of backwards because I actually like the resources section, and I usually direct teachers here when we're doing professional development with Tinkercad. Under resources, you've got several different helpful tools if you are just using Tinkercad for the first time. So for example, I tend to tell teachers to go to the Learning Center first and have their students start here with these tutorials. There are probably close to 30 different tutorials here, but I would recommend at least having students do the first 10, and the step-by-step directions are going to teach them exactly what they need to know about the basics of Tinkercad. How do you drag and drop an item? How do you adjust the size of it? How do you rotate it? Using the perspective tool to change the design a bit. It's going to walk them through all of that here. Also under resources, from a teacher's perspective, you'll find their collection of lesson plans. They have done a fantastic job of adding to the lesson plans that can be found here in Tinkercad. I love this inclusive play space one because it uses a lot of traditional shapes, basic shapes, as students work to build out a playground that is inclusive for all students. So that's another fantastic resource to work through. And then you'll find a few challenges. The blog here is updated regularly, so those are great resources as well. As you move across the top backwards, you'll find information about creating a classroom, how to join that classroom, some basic information regarding that. Under projects and gallery, you'll find various ideas of projects that teachers and students have done. I found this really helpful when I need an idea or I'm looking for a STEM activity that I want to do that I could use Tinkercad for that maybe I hadn't thought of. So between the projects and the gallery, you'll find lots and lots of different ideas there as well. And then of course, the place where you'll spend most of your time is under the Tinker button. So in here, Tinkercad has 3 specific parts, areas, that you have access to having a Tinkercad account. By the way, the Tinkercad account is entirely free. Every aspect of it is free, which is fabulous, fantastic. I love it when people do that for teachers, so enjoy that as an educator. There are 3 parts. I'm again going to work backwards, kind of going from the probably least used item of Tinkercad to the one you'll spend most of your time in. Code blocks is a feature of Tinkercad that allows students to incorporate block coding into 3-dimensional builds. And so by connecting blocks together, if you're familiar with coding, a lot of coding applications use block coding as their platform, and so that should be rather familiar to students. This particular block coding in here can get very detailed and in-depth. I had to watch a few YouTube videos myself to be able to understand this a little bit better. But by connecting the blocks, you're then building out structures, because a lot of the structures that you build using coding are repeated over and over again, very similar to how this DNA structure is building upon itself. That's where the coding platform works really well. So here's one using a astronomy theme. So it's great to play around with. I would not recommend starting there in Tinkercad, but it is a fantastic option. The next one that we're going to look at is circuits. Tinkercad has an amazing circuit simulator. Again, this is not something that I would have used with my elementary students, but if you were at a more advanced level, thinking about high school students on a specific grad pathway, the circuitry simulator is fantastic inside of Tinkercad. They have microbit options, Arduino options. It's really, really well done. So that would be something worth looking into if that was of interest to you. And then the third one is 3D design, which is where most people end up when they have the idea of teaching kids about 3D modeling and potentially 3D printing. So from here, I'm going to click on Start Tinkering. And here's again my home page of Tinkercad. I'm going to click on Designs, that's over here on the left-hand side, and Create 3D Design. That's where it gives me the option to choose if I want to do a circuit or go into code blocks. This is the platform of Tinkercad, and what you're seeing here is the work plane, which simulates the build plate inside of a 3D printer. So we're going to work and build 3-dimensionally off of the work plane. I'm going to walk you through a tutorial that we use quite often for Tinkercad training because it's a relatively easy build, and if it is something that you wanted to explore the option of 3D printing, it's a rather quick print. Within Tinkercad, at this point, you can begin building just about whatever you want to. The first thing I always recommend students do is to change the name of their project. So up here in the upper right-hand corner, Tinkercad is automatically going to name and save the project, which is fantastic, but it's going to be a very strange name. And if I had a class of, say, 25 students and all of their projects had weird names, that would be rather confusing over time. So I generally have students type their name and then whatever the project is. Just makes it a little bit easier for identifying later on when it's stored within my class. The next feature that I want to point out is currently we're looking at the basic shapes in Tinkercad. Here it tells me it's basic shapes, and there's a drop-down arrow that will change all of the potential structures, images that I have within Tinkercad. So basic shapes is a fantastic place to start. But if you get into designing more and more, you might want to play around with design starters, things that you could build off of, like a dice. There are creatures and characters, there are structures and scenery, there are specific pieces of hardware. Featured collections includes collections from NASA, collections from the Smithsonian, so you'll find some really interesting pieces in there that are available to work with as well. What I love about this is that this is where Tinkercad goes beyond 3D printing, in my opinion. I see this being used by a language arts teacher, a social studies teacher, where you want the students to build something like an old school shoebox diorama. They could actually do it three-dimensionally here in Tinkercad. They could build out the walls of their box, then they could add in the people and the structures that represent the story they're reading, sharing a historical event by creating historical figures. I've seen book characters created using basic shapes. So the possibilities are really endless when you get into designing in Tinkercad. What we're going to focus on today is a very simple name tag. This would be something that could be hooked onto a backpack or a lanyard, but it's a really easy one to design and kind of get the basic understanding of how Tinkercad works. So we're going to live today within basic shapes, and we're going to start by dragging and dropping this red cube onto the work plane. When I do that, a few things pop up. I get this box here that gives me an indication that it's currently operating as a solid. I could change that to a hole, but we would not want to do that with the base of our name tag. You can actually make adjustments here as well, but I don't prefer to use this. I actually like working off of the work plane. So when my cube appears on the screen, I get these little white dots in the corners that allow me, by clicking on it, to drag and change the shape and size of my name tag. So by pulling a corner, I'm going to adjust the measurement, which currently is in millimeters. I can change that down here at the bottom. I actually prefer it in millimeters. I think it's great for students to start thinking about that type of measurement, especially when it comes to 3D printing, because you want most of your 3D prints to be smaller. So I'm going to leave it in millimeters, and I want it to be somewhere around 30 by 60. So I can actually click on the box itself and adjust the size, or I can drag it and adjust the size. So there's step one. The second step is I want to go to the center square. That's the one that adjusts the height of my name tag. And we're looking at this as just a base to the nameplate. And so I want it to be rather thin. I'm going to make this a 4, height of 4. So I just have this base to work off of. That is step one. Next, we're going to go back over here to basic shapes. I'm going to find this orange tube. It already has a hole in it, which makes it kind of nice for what we're going to use it for. I'm going to overlap it just slightly with the base that I just laid on the work plane. And then I want the next step to be, I'm going to adjust the size here. From the center, I'm going to adjust the height down to the same height of 4 that I had the other one on as well. And so if I look at it right now, I should notice that it's sitting above my work plane just a little bit. And so this is a great opportunity to share the perspective box up here in the upper left-hand corner. I'm going to change this view so that I can see it from the front. And then just by clicking on these little arrows that are hard to see, I can change the way that I see this. Well, what this is telling me is that my object, that tube that I placed, is not sitting all the way down on the work plane. It's kind of floating up above my platform. This black arrow is what allows me to move that. And so I want to move it to where it's now sitting at 0. That tells me that it's now in line, and you can see I can no longer see it. If I go back to my front view, I can tell that it's aligned now. Sometimes that happens when you drag it out. Sometimes it will be on the work plane. I don't have a good reason for why it does that or does not do that, but it is helpful to just check to make sure that it is in the correct location. And I'm going to move this just a little bit. I can center it here. This is where my lanyard would hook into my name tag, or if I had a ring, key ring that I wanted to use. I could also drag this shape over to the end if I wanted it to be a name tag that looked more like this. I have lots of options here. For now, I'm going to leave it there. So we have our second component, our base and our ring. And the third thing that we're going to do is drag the text out onto the plate. So I found it here under basic shapes, dragged it out onto the screen, and I get this box that pops up again. And this is important because this is where I can adjust the text. So inside of this text box, as I'm typing, it's going to adjust the text on my screen. And then what I would need to do is, using those corners again, is just to resize it so that it fits onto the nameplate that I have. Now, if I'm clicked on the text, I again get this box currently on here telling me that it is a solid. So if I change the view again, what I'm seeing is my name stacked on top of the plate that I've built. Now, in a perfect scenario, if I was going to 3D print this, the less filament that I use, the better, the shorter the time it's going to take to print. And if I'm printing a classroom of 25 name tags, I would want them to be relatively short. So as long as I'm clicked on the text, I can again click on this center button that's going to adjust the height, and I can drop it all the way down to where it just barely comes off of the platform. That way it's going to use less filament and take less time. You can't really see that from this view. That's why that perspective box is really important. So again, while I'm clicked on the text and I have this box open where I adjusted the text before, I can also change my name to be a whole by just clicking. Currently was a solid, I just clicked on the whole button, and what this does is it now shows my name going through the platform. So it actually would not print any filament in that space while 3D printing in an actual machine. The only problem with changing your name from a solid to a whole, in my case, is that this tiny little section of the A, this section of the B, and this section of the E would fall away because there would be nothing to hold it in place if I left it as a whole. That's really just personal preference. So for now, I'm going to change it back to a solid, but that's an easy pick there. The other thing that I'll point out, and kind of going back and forth between this, is if you're given the option to choose a color, students love to do this, go back and forth between colors, it's important for them to understand that if they're in the designing phase, they can change the color to whatever they want it to be. If they are printing it on a 3D printer, the actual color of the object at the end is going to be whatever colored filament is in that machine. So it doesn't really matter. A lot of times they spend so much time coloring here that it's a waste of time in the end. But if they were designing something from scratch that was going to be a digital 3D design, then they could use the colors in any way they want to. All right, so I currently have the base plate, my text, and the ring as 3 separate objects. The last step that I need to do before 3D printing, if I was going to choose that, is I need to highlight and group all of these 3 items together. Right now they would almost 3D print as 3 separate things. So to do that, I'm going to pull my cursor off to the side, left click, and drag a box around it, almost as if I was highlighting. So left clicking, drag the box, and this pops up. And up here at the top, it's the 3rd image over. I want to group those items together. And I know that it's melded together because now the color changes to all one solid color, and my ring now appears as if it's part of the object itself. At this point, I am done designing a name tag. It's really simple, a great activity to play around and introduce Tinkercad to students. What I would do at this point is go here to export, and within the export button, I have either the option to save it for a 3D print or save it for laser cutting, which is kind of nice because you can use this platform for both. If I was going to 3D print it, I would save it as an STL. It would automatically save my document, and then I would have access to using a 3D printer and sharing that file to 3D print after slicing it. So, but the idea of Tinkercad at least allows you to see all of the different types of things that you can do, And because students are just so well versed in technology these days, just allowing them to play within Tinkercad after they've watched the tutorials, they would have an easy time learning and figuring this out. The last part of Tinkercad that I will point out are these buttons up here across the top. So currently I am working within the 3D design portion for building out a 3D design. That's showing you this symbol here. The next one is the newly created simulation lab. I'm going to click on it because it's really not going to work well for this particular object. I'll kind of share a different viewpoint of that here in a second. But the simulator allows students to add motion to what they're creating. This is fantastic if you're having students design a Pop-A-Shot game or a marble run or a maze of some kind that you want a ball to move through. They can use the simulator to actually simulate that movement to see if it would work correctly. It's a fantastic addition. The next one over here is more of a Minecraft Lego type feel. So what it's showing you right now is my name tag that I just built in block form. So students can actually build more of those Minecraft type designs in the blocks feature. And then this last one is the Legos. So it actually truly looks like Legos. This is what my name tag would look like if it was built out of Lego blocks. So those features are fantastic additions to just give you another way to use Tinkercad. It's fantastic. So as we wrap this up, I hope that you have found this interesting. If you're new to Tinkercad, I never used Tinkercad when I was in the classroom. I was a little bit intimidated by 3D printing, and in this new role where I am training teachers how to use 3D printers, Tinkercad has just been a fantastic resource, and I'm disappointed in a sense that I didn't use it in my classroom when I was with students, but it is a just fantastic way to add a 3D component or 3D design element into your everyday teaching. Thank you for joining me today in Tinkering with Tinkercad. My email address is amber@firstmakerspace.com with a 1ST. I will share that link with you. If you ever have any questions, I'm a valuable resource that's happy to help you at any time, or you can visit our website at www.firstmakerspace.com, and again, that's with a 1ST. First Makerspace has free STEM curriculum. To access this curriculum, visit www.firstmakerspace.com, click on Curriculum at the top of the page, create your login, and you will have access to all NGSS K-12 lesson plans.